To say that AMD is doing well would be an understatement. They have really done fabulous over the last couple of years, but especially this year. And when it comes to the CPU market share, well, they hold a lot of it. They're at a historic high. Now, they are namely doing really, really well in the CPU space because of the Vcache processors that they have, namely the X3D ones and currently the 9800 X3D. If you're building a gaming rig, a high-end gaming rig, that is the processor to go for, hands down. However, Intel might have something up their sleeve. If you enjoy this type of content, you can throw a thanks my way by doing everything that's up here. Like, share, subscribe, of course, hit the notification bell and comment. So Intel has this new Vcache processor coming out. It's called BLLC. I'm not going to get into too much detail on that in this video because this is about AMD, but I did a video on it if you want to check that out. It's, trying to compete, and that's good. You want as many players as you can possibly get in this CPU space. Why? Well, competition. That triggers innovation, and hopefully it will somehow equalize prices across the board, although prices these days, well, are through the roof. So AMD CPU market share has reached an historic high of 32.2%. This is in the second quarter of this year. That's up. Get this, 23% from a year ago. So if you use the math, and next year it is up another 25%. That is very worrisome, certainly for Intel, unless, of course, Intel can come out with some kind of miracle CPU. And AMD is claiming a almost 40% share of the desktop CPU revenue in the second quarter, and that's mainly attributed to the higher pricing of its popular X3D chips. And by the way, I will link you to this article, like I always do, in the YouTube description down below if you want to find out more information about it. Now, it is important to note that while AMD has shipped more lower-end desktop CPUs, and that's in the past, and yes, AMD was always known for that, cheap, relatively inexpensive processors that would do not as good as Intel, but still do extremely well. Well, that was the past, and this is now. And now the overall desktop market, well, is starting to trend more towards AMD and not Intel, because Intel's shipments are shrinking. And I know probably many of you who are watching this are going to say, the hell with Intel, let's watch them absolutely fail. But we don't want them to do that, actually, because you do, as I mentioned earlier, want to have as many players as possible in whatever space we're talking about. In this particular case, it is the CPU desktop gaming space for the most part. But yeah, because of innovation and lower prices and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, who knows what Intel will come up with? Maybe the next processor that they're planning, if they're going to be able to pull it off, because Intel, well, they're not doing very well, and it's kind of a mess, to be frank. But let's hope that they can stay in this market for the reason of, competition and innovation and overall equalizing of prices. Now, have you heard of the new AMD processors? These are the Threadripper 9000 chips, and they're thousands of dollars, but uber fast. So AMD, I don't think is going to be going anywhere anytime soon, and they definitely have their eye on the ball, and they plan on doing as well as they possibly can. And that's really good to see. Now, while AMD is doing very well in the desktop CPU space, they're not doing so well in the laptop CPU space, because their laptop CPU share actually fell 20% in the second quarter from 22.5% in the first quarter, and that is substantial. This is probably due to consumer market, was weak overall, and Intel's gains in the business PC segment, which is typically stronger in the first half of the year. So we'll see how this does going forward in 2025. So let us know how you feel about AMD and Intel overall. And also chime in on whether you have an AMD processor or an Intel processor, because it would seem that the majority of gamers, at least, are now choosing, if they're building a new system, an AMD, especially the 9800X 3D, because you can tweak the living heck out of it. You can overclock it to 5.4 gigahertz without any issues. It is relatively cool overall and a perfect CPU, and goes very well with high-end GPUs.